The suicide bombing at Kabul's Hamid Karzai International Airport on August 26, 2021, remains one of the darkest moments of America's withdrawal from Afghanistan. In those chaotic final days, as thousands of Afghans pressed against the gates seeking escape, a single attacker slipped into the crowd and detonated explosives. The blast killed 13 U.S. service members, 11 Marines, 1 Navy corpsman, and 1 Army soldier, along with more than 170 Afghan civilians. Years later, the attack is not just a memory. It is a wound, reopened with each unanswered question. Could it have been prevented? Were warnings ignored? Who bears responsibility? For the families of the fallen, accountability has been slow in coming. But now, former Army officer and television host Pete Hegseth, who has become an outspoken voice on military accountability, says he anticipates a full review of the circumstances to be completed by mid-2026. The announcement comes as both Congress and the Pentagon struggle with the complex legacy of the Afghanistan withdrawal, an event that continues to shape debates about American power, decision-making, and the cost of war. To understand why the review matters, one must return to the scene itself. The Abbey Gate, one of the main entry points to the Kabul airport, was a choke point. American troops were tasked with processing desperate Afghans who had been promised evacuation, while also screening for threats. Intelligence reports had warned of a possible suicide bombing, and some British forces had reportedly shifted their positions in response. Still, U.S. troops remained in place, vulnerable, exposed, and trying to balance impossible humanitarian and security demands. When the bomb detonated, the blast tore through the crowd. Survivors recall bodies thrown into the air, chaos overtaking the gate, and medics rushing to save the wounded with limited supplies. For many Americans watching on television, the attack symbolized the tragic end of a 20-year war. In the aftermath, official statements emphasized the bravery of the troops and the inevitability of risk in such a chaotic operation. But critics quickly pointed to troubling details. Warnings ignored, reports suggested that specific intelligence had identified Abbey Gate as a high-risk target. Some officers later testified that requests to close the gate had been denied. Command decisions. Who made the call to keep troops in such an exposed position? Were political leaders pressing to process as many evacuees as possible, even at increased risk? Operational confusion. The coordination between U.S. and allied forces, Afghan partners, and intelligence agencies was patchy at best. Could better communication have saved lives? For families of the fallen, these are not abstract policy questions. They are personal. They want to know whether their sons and daughters died because of unavoidable tragedy or because of preventable mistakes. Pete Hegseth is no stranger to the politics of military accountability. A veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan, he has long criticized what he sees as bureaucratic failures in the Pentagon and political leaders who avoid responsibility. In interviews and on his television platform, he has pressed for deeper investigations into the Kabul bombing, often amplifying the voices of Gold Star families. Now, Hegseth says he anticipates that a comprehensive review will be complete by mid-2026. While he is not the investigator himself, his public statements reflect growing pressure from Congress, particularly House and Senate committees, to release documents, testimonies, and classified assessments. Hegseth frames the review not as a partisan exercise, but as a moral obligation. The American people, and especially the families of those 13 heroes, deserve the truth, he said in a recent appearance. We cannot move forward until we've answered what went wrong that day. For the Department of Defense, the Kabul attack review is a delicate matter. On one hand, military leaders want to honor the fallen and acknowledge lessons learned. On the other, the review could expose painful truths about decision-making at the highest levels. Some retired officers have warned that the final report may reveal uncomfortable gaps in leadership, intelligence, and coordination. There is also the political overlay. The Biden administration has defended its decision to withdraw from Afghanistan, while critics argue that the chaotic execution undermined U.S. credibility. A mid-2026 timeline means the review will arrive squarely in the next administration's term, potentially reshaping debates about foreign policy, military readiness, and accountability. Perhaps no group feels the urgency of the review more than the families of the 13 U.S. service members. Over the past 3 years, they have spoken out publicly, written letters to Congress, and demanded meetings with officials. Many feel their loved ones were let down, not just by enemy fire, but by a chain of decisions that exposed them unnecessarily. For them, the review is not about political score settling. It is about closure, honesty, and the dignity of knowing the truth. Some have said that until answers are given, the nation's promise to honor the fallen remains unfulfilled. The Kabul airport attack is not just an isolated tragedy. It is a symbol of the costs of prolonged wars, of the risks of rushed withdrawals, and of the human price of political decisions. A full review, if it is thorough and transparent, could serve as a case study for future conflicts, highlighting what went wrong, what could have been done differently, and how to better protect troops in moments of crisis. For military planners, the lessons will be practical: how to manage evacuation operations under threat, how to process civilians without creating soft targets, how to align intelligence with tactical decisions. For policymakers, the lessons will be strategic: how to weigh humanitarian obligations against security realities, and how to communicate risk honestly to the public. By mid-2026, if Hegseth's anticipation proves correct, the review will finally be released. Its findings may not satisfy everyone. Some will argue it comes too late. Others will see it as essential accountability, even years after the fact. What is certain is that the Kabul attack will not fade quietly into history. It will remain a touchstone in America's story of Afghanistan, a reminder that wars do not end neatly, and that the sacrifices of young men and women demand more than solemn ceremonies. They demand answers. Pete Hegseth's call for a full review by 2026 is more than a timeline. It is a challenge to a nation that often moves on too quickly from its own mistakes. For the families of the 13 Americans, for the Afghans who died alongside them, and for the future troops who may one day stand in similar danger, the review represents a chance, however belated, for clarity, accountability, and lessons learned. The bombing at Abbey Gate was a tragedy. Whether it was also a failure is the question history must now answer.